Hello, in the fourth and final episode from this series on Schillinger harmonization of a diatonic melody, we will look at the symmetric harmonization technique. This is applied to the by now familiar diatonic melody from part 1. After discussing the fundamentals of the S13 chord structure families, you will see a set of melody harmonization examples. This tutorial series is about the application of techniques from the Schillinger system of musical composition book 6, the correlation of harmony and melody. Chapter 3 discusses the process of harmonizing a melody. We start with a given diatonic melody presented in part 1. After showing diatonic and chromatic harmonization in parts 2 and 3 respectively, now the focus is on the symmetric harmonization approach, using chord structures from the S13 families. You'll see fundamental aspects and various full melody harmonization examples. You may support my tutorial production efforts through a PayPal donation or become a long-term patron. Let's now dive into the symmetric harmonization approach. This section summarizes the content from part 1 in the series. Fast forward to section 3 for the new aspects. This series is based on the Schillinger system of musical composition book 6, which correlates melody aspects from book 3 and the special theory of harmony in book 5. Part 1 presented this overview diagram, with symbol M for melody on the left. The example melody was covered there in great detail. Book 6, chapter 3 lists 3 harmonization approaches: diatonic, chromatic and symmetric. Since the melody may also be of either type, there is a total of 9 possible combinations that reduces to 3 options in case of a diatonic melody. In part 2, all chord progressions were based on a 7-pitch diatonic scale and on chord structures in thirds. In part 3, the approach was extended by introducing chromatic alterations and 3 chord groups. In this part, you'll see the symmetric harmonization technique, which uses the concept of the S13 chord structure families. Watch this video as an introduction to the system terminology. Revisit part 1 from the series that discusses melody design aspects. The annotated melody shown here is a 9 measures long phrase in 4/4 time signature and based on the 7-pitch Ionian scale. There's a rhythmic attack duration pattern overlay with 8-note time unit. Thus we obtain a diatonic melody in C major, with typical characteristics such as an overall pitch curve with climax and various resistance increasing techniques, such as the leap step patterns, the use of secondary axes, syncopation and the cambiata patterns. Listen to the source diatonic melody in C major. This section is about the fundamentals of symmetric harmonization of a diatonic melody. The S13 chord structure family is the building block for this approach. But first, let me make it clear that symmetric harmonization is different from creating a chord progression in the Schillinger symmetric system of harmony. In the latter case, the characteristic symmetry aspect is the equal division of the chord roots over the octave. The score shows sets of 2, 3, 4 and 6 roots in the symmetric harmony system that we obtain through equal division of the octave interval into 6, 4, 3 and 2 semitones. Then we put chord structures over one of these symmetric root systems. The chord type selection is an independent design parameter. The score shows 3 examples in the 4-root system. The top row has constant chord structure with major triads on the left and minor triads on the right. The bottom staff shows the option with variable chord structures. This is the basic principle behind creating a symmetric harmony chord progression, and I will show how that approach fails when applied to melody harmonization. I showed many examples of symmetric harmony chord progressions in earlier tutorials. For an introduction, once again refer to this video. In the current approach to melody harmonization, the symmetry characteristic lies in the chord structure. I find the Schillinger label somewhat misleading, but let me show what is meant by this approach. We are still in Schillinger System Book 5, the special theory of harmony, with chord structures in thirds, created from a diatonic pitch scale. Thus, we may derive 7-note chord structures as 13 that contain all chordal functions between root 1 and 13. Considering all possible stacking combinations of major and minor third intervals yields a total set of 36 chord structures in the S13 family. The example shows 4 such structures. The chord note stacking corresponds to chordal function 1, the root in the bass, and then 3rd, 5th and so forth until chordal function 13 in the lead part. Some of these structures may be interpreted as extended chords in thirds, such as the dominant, the major and the minor chord types. The fourth example is a non-diatonic polychord structure with a triad stacked on top of a lower layer tetrachord. When applying these chord structures in the harmonization process, several guidelines return that we saw in earlier episodes in the series. Note that since the chord structure contains up to 7 notes, we may achieve familiar 4-part harmony settings such as this, or hybrid harmony 5-part settings, or a very dense strata harmony setting with, in this example, 2 layers containing all 7 chordal functions. Still, the melody note chordal function selection will determine the underlying chord structure. Each note may be any of the 7 chordal functions. Combining multiple melody notes into a single chord in case of sparse harmony will limit the S13 chord options, as you will see later. We still use this diagram for selecting the chord highest extension for best support of the melody. The green squares show the chord upper chordal function equal to or 1/3 interval below the melody chordal function. Schillinger explains how the selection of a specific S13 chord structure implies a definite harmonic style. In general, we use a single structure for harmonizing an entire melody, or maybe 2 chord structures, 3 being the rare exception. In order to demonstrate symmetric harmony principles, we return to the diatonic melody from part 1. During the harmonization process, we still use the design parameters chord density, m/h, and melody tension range. I will show several approaches and examples. Let me show how the strict symmetrically distributed root system fails in the context of melody harmonization. The example has the melody in the upper staff. I started the harmonization with the 3-root system R4I, with roots A flat, E and C. I aimed for a fairly sparse 4-part setting, preferably with a single chord structure and smooth voice leading. I wanted the single major 7 chord in root and inversion positions to cover all melody notes. Measure 1 is fine with melody notes G and C representing chordal functions 7 and 3 on root A flat respectively. The first hiccup is in measure 2, where we may consider A natural in the lead a passing tone over root E, but that lands on the G, which is the sharp 9, not the regular 3, and proceeds with the minor 9. In order to incorporate these notes, we might adapt the chord structure with unfamiliar extensions or deviate from the diatonic chords in thirds approach. The next problem is the pitch F in measure 3 over root C, which again we have to consider a passing tone. But then in measure 4 we are completely getting off track with E natural and D in the lead. My only option here is to change the chord structure from major to altered extended minor. But then the next clash is in measure 5, where we have the minor 7 D natural in the melody, against the major 7 D sharp in the harmony. With the melody G natural in measure 6, there's another conflict. The only solution is to give up the chords in thirds approach and adapt the chord structure in each measure. This is not what Schillinger intends to achieve in his symmetric harmonization technique guidelines. The MIDI rendering is with Superior drummer, piano tech, ample sound bass and swarm saxophone instruments. So yes, we may use an equal division of the octave symmetric root basis for the harmonization, but there is no chord structure consistency along the phrase, which is one of the favorable characteristics of the S13 family approach in symmetric harmonization. Therefore, I created an example that is more in line with the Schillinger recommendations. The single S13 structure is shown on the left, with a major 7 augmented 5 tetrachord, below a major triad consisting of chordal functions 9, sharp 11 and 13. We use this single structure to harmonize the full melody. The next step is to pick melody chordal functions and find the corresponding root and chord tension that best support the lead. I try to capture the maximum number of melody notes with a single chord, a maximum sparse harmony so to speak, with m/h greater than 1. All notes for measures 1 and 2 can be interpreted as chordal functions in the S13 sharp 11 chord on root E flat. In measure 1 the 13 is equivalent to the added 6, and I used the 7th chord E flat augmented with major 7 as accompaniment. Since in measure 2 there is the sharp 11 in the lead, I wrote the extended 9 chord on beats 1 and 2. All melody notes in measure 3 are chordal functions of the S13 sharp 11 on root A flat. The same procedure is followed in measures 4 to 6. The appropriate root follows from the lead melody notes. In measure 7 there briefly is a denser harmony with 2 S13 sharp 11 structures, the latter held over into the next measure. Completing the melody harmonization with the chord on root C yields the root movement shown below the staff. This is a combination of diatonic and symmetric root cycles, and notice the many negative root movements. In case of multiple harmonization options, there may be some potential to introduce cadential quality, but the result is mainly a certain harmonic style determined by the single S13 structure. Since all chords are extended structures and thirds, I indicated the dissonant chordal function voice leading for 7, 9 and 11. In my solution I maximized the number of correct preparations and resolutions, but you'll find that this is not always possible. This completes the strict Schillinger approach to 4-part symmetric harmonization of a diatonic melody. The next example is the 5-part setting, a dense harmony with m/h smaller than 1, and this time using 2 S13 chord structures. These are extended dominant chords, one with the sharp 11. Long duration melody notes may receive more than one chord, and I follow the Schillinger guideline to increase the melody note chordal function number. In measure 1 pitch G moves from chordal function 11 to 13. In measure 4 note how the lead pitch E natural moves from 1 to 5 to 9. The hybrid 5-part harmony setting requires all chords to be in root position. The upper harmony tetrachords are neighboring chordal functions, except for a few structures not in thirds, such as the F9 in measure 2 beat 1, the E flat 13 in measure 3 beat 3, beat 1 in measures 5 and 8, and the closing chord C13, so I took some liberty here. For more on Schillinger hybrid harmony, watch these tutorials. The procedure is the same as before. Pick a melody note chordal function and find the corresponding chord root. Consider alternative options and then value the consequences for the root movement. Again, with this Schillinger technique we obtain a mix of diatonic and symmetric root cycles. I aimed for a maximum of diatonic and positive root cycles in order to create cadential feeling. For example, in measure 1, B flat to E flat, also in measure 3, and the descending fifth root cycle, E to A to D in measure 4. The closing measure has a modified 2-5-1 closing with the E dominant 7 substitute for the regular dominant G7. In regular hybrid harmony, it is possible to achieve good dissonance handling. I marked these in the score, but the additional melody harmonization requirements prohibit consistent correct preparation and resolution of 7, 9 and 11s. Listen to this setting for small fusion jazz group with lead flugelhorn. My acquaintance with the acoustic samples V-horns collection. Let's return for a moment to the Schillinger symmetric system of harmony. This example demonstrates a full melody 4-part harmonization using the 3-root R4I system twice. Note the E flat G to B and F to D flat A pattern. The 4-root R-3 system with roots D, F, A flat and B, and then the 6-root system R to I before closing with a harmonic sequence. Almost all melody notes are interpreted as higher and therefore dissonant chordal functions. The chord density increases as the example progresses. All chords except one are in root position. Stop the movie for a second and check the handling of dissonant 7, 9 and 11 in the harmony. For each set of equal division roots, I selected a single chord type. See the dominant S9 in the opening measures, then a set of major 7 chord types, followed by an altered minor chord, then more dominant and major 7 structures. There is chord consistency for each root system, but the total set of chords has more than 5 elements, which runs contrary to the strict Schillinger symmetric harmonization approach. Yes, this example creates a useful contemporary mood, but it fails as a correct example. The next example adheres better to the strict symmetric harmonization guidelines. It is a 5-part harmony setting using just 2 S13 chord structures, both extended major chords. I chose chord roots that yield a majority of high melody note chordal functions. There are on average 2 chords per measure. Sustained longer melody notes follow the rule to increase the tension level. See measures 1, 4, 5 and 8. All chords are in root position, check the bass part. The hybrid harmony upper tetrachords are structures in thirds, although you will find some complex enharmonic notation. The root cycles are the result of this harmonization and obviously could not be pre-planned. It is a mix of positive and negative root cycles, although I aimed for a fairly strong cadential closing. Dissonant chordal function voice leading is marked in the score. The hybrid harmony technique certainly contributes to correct dissonance handling. mood is somewhat similar to the previous example, but this example is far more in line with the fundamental idea behind the Schillinger symmetric harmonization approach. In this example, we follow more or less the same approach. There are two S13 chord structures, an extended major 9 and an extended minor chord SM11. The setting is again hybrid harmony 5-part with diatonic roots in the bass, and you will hear a D Dorian minor mode flavor with obviously quite some chromatic alterations in the harmony. I aimed for a very sparse chord density, C measures 1 to 3 and 7 to 8 in particular. Whenever possible, I chose those roots that generate diatonic root cycles. See the prominent sequence of descending fifths, G to C to F to B flat to E flat in the middle. Dissonant chordal function voice leading is annotated in the score. Some irregular preparations and resolutions are inevitable. The setting for lead electric guitar and the set of synthesizers creates a very different contemporary mood. In the final example, we create an orchestral setting. It is based on this 3-layer strata harmony setting with 7-note chords. You will not find such a multi-part example in the Schillinger book. I used two types of S13. The first, an extended minor chord, such as the opening E minor over D minor 7, and a more dissonant vertical stacking, see for example in measure 3, with the A minor triad over G flat augmented with raised 7. The latter chord is used at positions where I wanted to create more tension, more impact. For an introduction to Schillinger strata harmony, watch. Here's an example of how I regularly use the pitch disc diagram to find the chord root options for a given melodic phrase. Here the two cambiata patterns. The colored ring sections show the transposed versions as subsets of the polychords. I did not apply this option in the final solution. The chord density is fairly constant, with 2 chords per measure. All chords are in root position. There is note doubling in the second half of the phrase. The block chords obviously do not respect traditional dissonant voice leading rules. The melody is transposed to the upper octave to prevent overlap in the strata harmony setting. There is contrary motion between outer parts. This harmonization as such sounds horrible, but let's introduce some magic by transforming it into an instrumental form for orchestra. Here's the first page of the reduced score. The tempo is moderate, 76 beats per minute. This page contains a number of musical elements and techniques. The first is the use of strata harmony density control. This means that we will control the number of simultaneously sounding parts. Observe that the score starts with a very light setting, with an instrumental form that is a riff pattern derived from the first 2 upper layer triads and moving through orchestral groups. For an introduction to instrumental forms, watch this video. Here's an earlier video with the fundamentals of density control in strata harmony. Also, I spliced the melody into separate single measures and even smaller units. The diatonic melody starts in measure 4, but I used the first note, pitch G, as French horn signal in the introduction. Note how the density changes from single part to a very dense setting in measure 6. The melody from that measure is repeated twice before it continues in measure 9, which is building up to a tutti climax, with full 7-part chords for brass and 16-note strings and percussion arpeggios. On page 3, the part density reduces, and there's another repeat in measures 13 to 15, with the lead melody in imitation from low staccato spiccato cellos to the violins, with woodwind and percussion stabs accompaniment. There's a final single measure melody repeat in measures 16 to 17, before the piece closes with another tutti climax. Listen now to the MIDI orchestral rendering, which for me also was a test case for the February 2024 update of the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra sample library. Processing the 3-layer strata harmony symmetric harmonization has yielded an orchestral cue not unlike the style of Arthur Honegger and Igor Stravinsky. This score demonstrates that after completing the Schillinger harmonization approach, a lot more can be done before arriving at what I think is a mature and more interesting end result. We have come to the end of this 4-part series on Schillinger harmonization of a diatonic melody. I used a single diatonic melody as source material for all later examples. This was discussed in part 1, after which parts 2 to 4 focused on diatonic, chromatic and symmetric harmonization respectively. I hope that the many examples have proven the versatility of the different approaches. The melody underwent all sorts of metamorphoses. The common control parameters are the chord density m/h, that is, designing a sparse or busy harmonization, and the melody tension range. The latter is a guideline for selecting the chord extensions that best support the melody. All structures are chords in thirds, with up to 7 parts. The commonality in these approaches is also that, since starting from the melody, we have limited control over root movement. In a diatonic harmonization setting, there is still potential for creating a strong, stable progression with positive diatonic root cycles, and thus functional harmony cadential effect. But for the chromatic and symmetric harmonization technique, this is an end product, not a deterministic design parameter. You have seen various settings between 4-part and multi-layer strata harmony. In the former case, root and inversion positions were used, and we still aim for correct dissonant chordal function handling. This becomes more problematic as the number of harmony parts increases. Diatonic harmonization is the most standard and familiar technique. I showed how the mood changes as we adapt the melody tension range and apply various diatonic major or minor modes. For writing in symmetric harmony style, you have to agree on the fundamental Schillinger concept of the S13 chord families and how these determine a particular style. I find the chromatic system of harmony a fascinating extension to the regular diatonic harmony. But applying that within the context of a given melody becomes a complex puzzle, as I've stated several times in the previous episode. 2 more remarks on this system. In part 3, I introduced a limited set of chromatic harmony operations. I might do a separate series of tutorials on the system in the future. Secondly, in his book, Schillinger mentions the modifications of a symmetric harmonization into a chromatic by applying chromatic alterations, auxiliary and passing tones, but he does not present an example. Neither do I. The Schillinger book chapter is 23 pages long, and my 4-episode series only covers 3 out of a total of 9 options for melody harmonization. So there's a lot to discover when reading this chapter in depth, and then experiment with applying the techniques. With this series you have a nice overview of the most frequently occurring cases of writing a chord progression for a diatonic melody. No need to stick to the overused 1-6-4-5 chord changes, I would say. Instead, now you have a multitude of options for creating variation and fresh chord progressions. This last episode was recorded with heavy building construction work going on in the neighborhood. Listen carefully and you may hear the pile ramming sounds in the background. For my Patreon supporters, there's a companion document with text, diagrams and score fragments. If you found this series useful, give the episode a like and subscribe to the channel. Follow the links in the video description in case you would like to support my tutorial production efforts through a PayPal donation or as a patron. Visit the website for more content. Thanks for watching.